Facebook and a number of other social media outlets, and there wasn't really the need to have a place to put your portfolio as well. Having said that, the group that runs Men Artists reimagined the site as a publishing site as well, and they have sort of a healthy roster of journalists that report on Minnesota and then Midwestern art in general. So that's the way they sort of responded to that. It still has thousands of artists logged into it and sharing their work every day. But I think this publishing side of it has really helped them sort of stay relevant. I'm going to go through these really quickly. We have a sculpture garden across the street from our building, and we have a web app that allows you to walk through the garden, and then once you go up to an artwork, it provides you with more information. It's very simple. We've never had a design collection at the Walker, so a few years ago, my former boss, Andrew Blavelt, put together a site called Minnesota by Design, which celebrates design in Minnesota. And the key aspect as to why it had to be a website and why it had to sort of use this submission-based system was that he was really interested in exploring how you collect intangible design, whether that's building, which won't fit into a museum, or a giant airplane, whether it's something like systems design or the design of the lake system within Minneapolis. And this was a site that we put together to represent that. Our curators at the Walker maybe aren't super interested in digital art these days, but they do every once in a while put on exhibitions, and this was a recent one that was actually quite popular by a group called Team Lab, and it's called Graffiti Nature, and basically it's an immersive environment where participants are allowed to, or encouraged to, draw on the silhouettes of animals, and then the drawings are scanned, and then they are reprojected out into the space, and then the animals eat each other or they interact with the natural elements, and it's a larger statement on environmentalism. And then maybe one of our larger initiatives was tackling how to make the film collection of the Walker visible to our visitors. So we have maybe, I think, 1,000 titles in our Reuben Benson film collection, and they vary from 30 seconds to three hours or longer. And what we ended up doing was taking this space that we had previously used as a lecture room, refitting the entire space as basically your own personal cinema. So it has really high quality projection. It has a darkened room. It has amazing seats. And basically you can walk in there at any time. You can interface with, right now it's about 300 of the titles in our film collection are available. The film department also puts a lot of effort into curating playlists, so you can walk in and watch 10 one-minute videos. The space is also used a lot by classes in Minnesota who will check out the space and use it as a research tool to watch old films by Stan Breckage or whoever that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And sometimes you have people dance in that room as well. This is a project I'll tell you a little bit more about because I was directly involved with it. It was called Intangibles, and it's basically a curated selection of products or artworks, depending on who you are, by a multidisciplinary group of artists from around the world, including designers, artists, visual artists, dancers, architects, digital artists. But the concept of the thing was that they all had to be intangible objects, and all of these objects would be for sale through our digital shop, which I will show you in a second. I'm actually going to skip through these. So this is our digital shop. It's based on a Shopify platform. It's pretty simple. It's just got a skin on top of it. But our basic premise was that we were going to have to use everything that the shop already offered because we actually had no budget to create a new website anyway, and work within those limitations to actually create an interesting project. So these are the actual screen grabs of the 16 products that were for sale. And each product, as you can see here, we had to help the artists visualize them because a lot of them would just have an idea but no visuals, so our design studio would create the visuals for them. They had to come up with a title, they had to come up with a description. Many of the artists chose to use the description field as a place to put text in. Some of them are actually essays within the description field. And then they could also manipulate the price. So some of them use alternative pricing schemes. For example, the price would decrease over time, or the price would would be adjusted based on where you live. So we used basically what was a very simple template meant for one thing, which is selling products, and then we used it as a way to kind of introduce an unexpected experience to our shop visitors and to hopefully get people interested in the shop in addition to being interested in these products. So a few examples. Nico Muhly, the neoclassical composer, would compose a 30-second ringtone for you. So he made 12 of these available. And once it was purchased, and they sold out immediately. Once it was purchased, the visitor was put into contact with Nico via email. They got to talk about why they bought it, what kind of music they wanted. And then this guy who writes operas for the Met would then write you your own individual piece of music that you alone owned. And that went for about $150. This was also an interesting way to experiment with how to get our audiences into contact with our artists in new ways. It's usually highly mediated, and they don't get to talk to the artists directly, but this was a way around that. Sort of conceptual architect Andreas Angelidakis from Greece created this platform in Second Life, which he calls the loneliest place on earth, because not as many people are using Second Life as they used to. And it's actually a really beautiful structure, and he's selling it for something like $20,000, and no, we have not sold it. This is a piece by a local choreography group where they're very interested in addressing issues of the body and public space and agency and politics. And you could buy a personal dance from them for a certain amount of money. You paid based on how many minutes of the dance you wanted. Once they got your email, they would call you at some time. It could be in the morning, it could be in the middle of the night. And then they would give you a location in Minneapolis to meet them at, and then you would get your personal dance from them. This is a piece by Alex Soth, who is a pretty well-known American photographer. He would send you a Snapchat edition. So his photos, are usually print, obviously, and sell for thousands of dollars. Here you have 10. You could pay $90, and we had a number of galleries show this work, and we had a number of just young kids buy it and then show it on their laptop at home, their apartment. This was one of the more ridiculous uses of the shop interface. And then finally, we were looking at a lot of inspiration from kind of the retail world. This is by, I think, Tesco, the supermarket in Asia, where in the subways they would actually put up these 2D representation of 3D objects, which you'd then buy from your phone and have delivered to your house. So we sort of did our cheaper version of that. But it was important that we wanted these to be represented in the physical shop in addition to being online as well. And then finally, how am I doing for time? 7 minutes. Okay. So then I think the largest digital initiative that we have going on at the moment is our commitment to publishing, and specifically online publishing. So the Walker has a long history of great books and great magazines and great print design. And back in 2005, I think Robin and our web editor, Paul Schmelzer, started the Walker blog. So every programming department at the Walker had a different blog. From then, in 2011, we decided we were going to amp up our online publishing because we really found it a great strategy to reach out into the world. I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is a slide just looking at all of our various communication channels, really trying to create content that can live through various media. There's obviously sort of a integrated communication appeal to the whole idea of this online publishing, but for us there's also an aesthetic and a conceptual appeal to what does it mean to create a hybrid print digital publishing ecosystem. This is just tracking one piece of content through a variety of media. So as I said, we were known for doing books, so we asked ourselves how could we bring that design expertise to the web. We also printed a monthly or bi-monthly magazine for many years, which is now going to revert back to being an editorial vessel as opposed to a newsletter. And in 2011, we were faced with redesigning our website, and we had to ask ourselves a number of questions. The first question I think designers will frequently ask is, what is a particular medium good for? So we ask ourselves, what is the internet good for? We wanted to know how we could be an online platform for our audiences. We also wanted to sort of understand how we value virtual audiences versus physical audiences. And this is something that's really been a paradigm shift at the Walker that we've actually written into most of our strategy documents now, that we value the two equally. And that doesn't mean we spend the same amount of money on two audiences equally by any means, but that we are interested in both, and that we think both virtual audiences and physical audiences can interact with art or interact with ideas in ways that live up to our mission. I also think as a contemporary art museum, we're very comfortable with sort of challenging the very foundation of what we are. So I've been at Walker 14 years, and I've been through a number of exercises where we've asked ourselves, what would the Walker be without a physical building? So there's just kind of a comfort with the idea that we can fulfill our mission with a lot of audiences around the world that won't potentially lead back to physical visitation. Having said that, we're desperate to get people in the door as well. So there's a tension there. I mentioned we're about ideas. It's written into our mission that we examine questions that shape and inspire us. And this idea of questions, I think, is really core to what we do. The idea that contemporary art is a dialogue between the artist, the artwork, and the visitor. There's no one right answer or no one interpretation to any particular artwork. I think our online publishing really tries to dive into that and tries to highlight the ideas that connect art with daily life. Questions about authority, publishing as a destination, and then marketing. We looked to online publishing sources for inspiration. Huffington Post, they will mix politics with cat videos. Vice, we were really interested in how they work their verticals and how these sub-brands within the larger Vice. BuzzFeed, just the notion of virality and how BuzzFeed is basically one large conceptual art project. McSweeney's for their tone, trying to understand what a museum's tone should be if we do have an editorial voice. And then the New York Times simply for how a news site operates. So the New York Times, I think, is probably the closest analogy to what we ended up with in 2011. It was a bit of a manifesto to come out and basically say our homepage is about ideas, our homepage is about linking you out into the world. And it was very successful, I think, in that regard. And I love this website. Having said that, within a year, we knew we had to redesign it. We knew it was incredibly complex. We were trying to figure out how we were serving these virtual audiences while also serving physical audiences. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of different opinions about that within the building. But just really quickly, the page highlights feature stories that were written within the institution. It also highlights a section called Art News from Elsewhere, which is linking out to other museums, sort of offering the idea that a museum can be a filter for culture, and that by linking to other museums, it's simply cooperation. Okay, I saw that in my eye. I'm going to jump ahead. This is what our new website looks like as of a few months ago. We've simplified it. We've held on to the idea of publishing as our main presence online. Having said that, we also made basically a global version of our website and a local version of our website. And this actually has relieved a little bit of the burden. So the local version of our website will feature probably 4 or 5 messages that are marketing our actual events that can be visited, whether it's the sculpture garden or an exhibition or a performance. And then below that, you get the publishing. Our global site basically only has one marketing message, and even that is really about letting people know what programs are happening at the Walker, and everything else is publishing. So that was one way that we kind of got around that. Really quickly, our publishing is based, we used to have, I think at our heyday, we had 12 blogs. That was way too many. We got it down to 9. We've brought that down to 5. We've started to use the word vertical instead of blog because we think it'll make us feel more serious of ourselves. These are the main blogs. They're for the design department, the education department, moving image, performing arts, visual arts. And they really represent the vertical content. We understand this as niche-based content that can have really deep appeal with niche audiences. The design content, for example, gets really read by design audiences, but it potentially isn't as interesting to the broader Walker audience. So we kind of developed this way of segmenting our content. The vertical really represent niche content, while Paul Schmelzer, who's our web editor, is responsible for sort of harvesting the horizontal content that we can push out to broader audiences to really display the brand. This I included because to achieve all of this writing with all of the different departments and have it ladder up to something worthwhile, new processes have needed to be created, and a woman named Annie Cleveland at the Walker brought this idea of story mapping to us, which I think is really fantastic. Now whenever we have a big show, everyone gets in the same room and actually comes up with all of the different stories that are possible, and this really allows us to then divvy this up. I'm almost done. Let's see. This is our magazine page. We could dive into a lot of this. We've also been working on creating a very flexible system because we do have a design department that can create custom solutions for a lot of content. We frequently create kind of branded identities for series of content, or for example, in the top right corner here, this is a link to our portfolio work, which we were able to put in as a little swiper into the stream. We can also create custom articles. This was an interview with a meme maker, which we then designed to look like a text chat. But the basic website was designed as a framework for us to populate moving forward, which I'm really excited about. These are some examples of some of the landing pages. So I've got maybe 3 more projects. Do you think I should stop or? Okay. Can we continue? 5 minutes? Okay. So then within the publishing world, I just want to highlight a few of the new tools that we've been developing. One of them is called Artist Op-Eds, and this is where we invite artists to quickly respond to issues in the news, because we believe that artists, contemporary art, bring a different lens to current events, a different lens to politics, and it's part of our mission to amplify their voices. So this series is called Artist Op-Eds. It has an online representation, it has its own little identity, and then at the same time we print out print-on-demand versions of each pamphlet, which actually have been quite successful when it comes to more social displays of this work. So we will have a talk by one of the artists where they explain what they're talking about within their artist op-ed, and we bring these and we see a really great sort of community-based distribution of these printed artifacts. But this just represents a little bit of the direction when I say hybrid print digital world that we want to move in. Really interested in how our print catalogs can be repurposed through our digital publishing, can be repurposed through print on demand, can be repurposed through our magazine, and not simply getting that content into all of those places, but also looking at each medium and asking where is the creative possibility and what do these mediums do differently. Another tool was developed a few years ago, actually under Robin, and this was sponsored by a Getty grant that asked several museums to interrogate what the idea of collections catalog looks like. In a lot of cases, it looks like a huge book that comes out every 10 years. This was sort of the prompt. Our response was basically to create a catalog that would be updated once a year with a new magazine, basically, and create a platform for the curators to dive into the collection and do research on a periodic basis based on what research they're doing and not locking it up into any sort of 10-year time cycle. I could go into this more, but I won't. I think this is the second to last one. A new tool that we haven't launched yet, but we're really excited about is we're calling swipe shows, which are basically very interactive slideshows that use a lot of video. They use a lot of the artist's voice, and they use very concise storytelling, very short sentences, I suppose, with the intention of actually telling some of these complex stories in a way that is very accessible, but is also very poignant. And I think even though the words might be few, when you add that to the artist's voice or to the photos, you can end up with these very poignant little slideshows. And we will be releasing these for most of the Sculpture Garden works in the garden, so people will be out in the garden and they'll be able to watch these and swipe through them. I'm showing you them sort of on a desktop format, but they're primarily designed for mobile. And the last one, I believe, is a new tool that's basically just a article template that allows you to toggle through multiple artists' take on the same subject. So we're going to be releasing a number of questions out into the world where we commission a few artists to respond to it, and you can sort of toggle back and forth between their responses. This was a blog post that blew up and ended up on a Right Wing America site, which I'm very proud of. We interviewed the Westboro Baptists about their fonts. We did a piece about artists responding to the recent DACA. Lots of pieces on Trump, obviously, and the Muslim travel ban. And so, yeah, I think our online publishing is really representing the Walker's intention to go out into the world and really connect the dots between contemporary art perspectives and people's daily lives. I think there's a number of ways you can do that. You can do that in the gallery. You can do that through art itself. But this is the way, I think the Walker is very dedicated to ideas at this particular moment. And this is the way that we've chosen to look out into the world. So there we go.
So thank you very much for your presentations. I would like to pose only one question and let then the audience take the word. So you both have talking about collection and what is available and what is not. So I was taking in this notion of digital collection and living collection. So in your point of view, what is changed from one decade ago and from now? And also, you are talking about this design philosophy. And Steve, I read a lot of your text in where you are always insisted about talking about art or show art on the edge, not computer art, nor new media art or digital art. Talking about performing moving images, and so how do you relate to this design philosophy? And yeah, you say digital collections and living collections, and for me that's it is related to the availability to the things that are in digital platforms.
So what's the relationship to the digital collection, the living collection? I mean, I think that, again, part of the way we conceived of new media initiatives was to work with existing ideas and then see how digital realm would, either extend it or change it. And so for me, the Digital Art Study Collection, I think, was a way of doing what I think museums have an obligation to do, which is to save culture, or, to represent culture. And this culture, I think we all understand digital dark ages is not just a kind of funny phrase. It's a very real kind of possibility, if not existing effect. And so, for me, in some ways, it was fairly straightforward. It wasn't, I think, trying to extend it in the way that the living idea is doing, which I think is a great idea. But obviously there was a failure there, because with the digital, you have this need to upkeep and to put the same amount of attention into it that you would into your publishing systems, so that it can be replicated and remain accessible. And I think, that's the problem, because that involves resources and time and commitment.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you think about was the different ways that the different disciplines are collected, and we're still actually figuring that out as an institution. We're a multidisciplinary institution that represents visual arts, performing arts, film video, have a vibrant, I say a word a lot, apparently, lots of commitment to an experimental in-house new media studio. And at the same time, there's commitments to new initiatives as well. And it's not always obvious like how one gets replaced with the other.
Okay, so I don't know what time we have left. Tenemos tiempo para preguntar. Es que no veo, con la luz no veo a Louis and his crew. Where are you guys? Tenemos tenemos tiempo para tres preguntas. ¿A quién iba a preguntar?
Hola, soy Alesha Mercado. Y mi pregunta para Emmet es, bueno, de todos los proyectos que presentó, me pareció, porque ya no hubo mucho tiempo, pero que el último es como un proyecto participativo. ¿Podrías explicar un poco más si es que la comunidad participa o ustedes convocan artistas? Y en todo caso, ¿qué otros proyectos participativos tendría el museo?
And are you referring to the Room for Debate, the Multiple Artist Perspectives project?
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Yeah, actually, we have been putting a lot of emphasis into our social media recently, and we have a great new social media manager who has a very sort of experimental style to what he does. And we're really interested in how we can insert a lot of these ideas that we're experimenting with, whether it's the artist's voice or a curator's voice, into broader social media landscape, and then how we can then provoke conversation. This could be a fool's errand, I think, but one of the strategies that we're using right now is this idea of question cards. So throughout the institution, we kind of asked every curator to come up with several questions that are at the core of the program, whether it is a performance or an exhibition. And then we take those questions, and then the design department turns them into small shareable cards that we then can share through social media. We can put out through our various channels, and they also get repurposed through our print pieces as well. And this is looking at sort of a phenomenon that we noticed in Bloomberg Business Week, where their covers were frequently going viral, and this idea that you can use museums need to embrace a more editorial perspective to really draw out some of the questions that are at the core of what they do. In the past, we've talked about artwork and artists in terms of why they're historically important, like what movements they're connected to, maybe describing the media, but we haven't really highlighted what's the question at the core of what they're working on that is really going to be attractive to audiences. And as far as participatory, so for me, that is hopefully going to lead to a participatory kind of dialogue with our audiences online. And as far as participatory digital media projects, I think mostly about our media tech projects inside the building, which allows people to interface with our collection. But other than that, I don't think we're diving too deep into kind of user-generated content or any of those areas.
Sería interesantísimo en esto relacionar como la parte de lo participativo y lo interactivo, ¿no? Sería una pregunta que queda ahí a partir de lo que dijiste. Ajá. Ah, ajá, el gap. ¿Tenemos otra pregunta? No veo. ¿Nadie? Vamos, chicos, anímense. Tenemos aquí a dos grandes expertos en la oportunidad de preguntarles. So, would you like
It's up to you.
Would you like to add something, or what do you see in the scene in Mexico? I don't know if you know what talking people, maybe Luis and his crew organizing this and digital museum, creating this platform for people.
I would actually make a plug for Northern Spark, which you didn't actually get to talk to a lot about, but it's actually, when it comes to interactive projects, this is maybe the most interactive I've seen. You didn't talk about it at all, basically. Northern Spark, I'm going to talk about it for him, is a project that Steve puts on every summer in Minneapolis, where he invites artists of all disciplines, but a lot of digital artists as well, to put up interactive experiments all throughout Minneapolis and St. Paul as well. And the event goes all night long. Frequently, people stay out until 5 or 6 in the morning. And from my perspective, it's a really amazing program. I've never seen Minneapolis this activated, being out in some of these places at 4 in the morning, interacting with weird digital interactive pieces. I was like a whole new way of sort of experiencing my city. So maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about that. Or good job with that.
Or what?
Or good job.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, I was thinking about that when I was putting this talk together, was that I think one of the things that struck me was that interaction between the physical and the virtual during new media initiatives, and that even though that wasn't necessarily a primary called out goal, it was something that was very important. And I think that became, sort of this work, next 15 years of work in public space, where I think one of the things that museums have that's problematic is that threshold, right? How do you get people over the threshold? What's that initial grab that gets them into the institution, especially when it's $25 or $30, or there's a price barrier as well. And so, I'm very interested in public sphere as a site for activity, and I think also a lot of artists are also interested in that. So it's really part of my general philosophy of trying to be on the trailing edge and really following artists and not trying to be a leader in that sense.
I think one of the things that strikes me about Northern Spark as well is that it doesn't necessarily feel like a digital conference or a digital thing, even though there's so much at the core of it, and the way that the sort of technology sort of seeds from the experience, I've always sort of appreciated.
You have asked one at the start of your presentation. You have asked one question too. I'm sorry. You have asked at the beginning of your presentation a question, but I write it and I can't actually find it. But you started with a question for Steve about his legacy and how he's confronting this reality in his new project. But maybe it's related with your last question.
I mean, I think we've dug into it a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there is a sense of responsibility towards digital projects that can be easy to overlook, and that is a problem.
The historical, like conscience and.
I think if I can just tack on that, I think part of what I was trying to say at the end there, and also at the beginning, at the end of New Media Initiatives, is that it's not about the people. And that, if there's anything, that's what institutions are designed for. is to take care of things. And so it can't, while passion will drive the creation of things, it has to figure out a way to get into that system so that it's taken care of regardless of who's coming in to the position or whatever. And I think that, you know, at this point, there is a significant amount of history that's, you know, locked in the Walker's hard drives, and it's really, they do have a decision to make. It has nothing to do with my legacy. It has everything to do with what kind of legacy do they want to end up with about the turn of the century and the start of some of these very important ideas and movements around digital art.
And I won't put anyone through my Spanish. So, I mean, I guess I just want to thank El Museo Digital to bring you two together, because I think it's really interesting to see the history of museum technology as well, and through one place, how a mission shifts over time, but then how you also see the through points that really have led to what you're doing right now, from what the collaborative kind of outward-looking kind of thing that was happening a long time ago. And so I think it's just, it is really interesting, but I'll put it out there, both of you talked about forever. And I know that when I met you, Emmett, we were with the Getty and the catalog project, and there was so much that the Getty was looking at. Can you guarantee that these new digital catalogs will be here forever? And you saw the people that got the funding. Yes, yes, we're doing this to make it last forever. Yes, yes, we're doing this for it to last forever. And I didn't work for Oski Place anymore, and I'm just like, none of us can guarantee that, because museums are also run by people. And the directors and the leadership and the boards are the ones who set what that direction is and what the commitment is. And I think there's a lot of education that we have to do with directors and boards of what this legacy is, when there's so much facing directors and boards as far as money and getting enough time. So I guess if there are any more comments about the word forever.
Yeah, no, and that was my point, because at some time institutions are related to people, and for example, in 2003, when the Walker ended the curatorial digital project, you have this critical position, and that was important for the legacy and the continuity that started out with Emmett, maybe. No?
Well, if I could, I think that's a really good point about forever. And when I was in San Jose, one of the things that happened is that we redefined the public art plan so that permanent meant at least 5 years. Because permanent was really preventing their vision of how to move forward with public art that was funded through the 1%, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I think, yes, I don't know that institutions are individuals. I think that's a debatable point. I think that they're systems. And that if we've learned anything in this, you know, age, is that, you know, well, so I'm not sure about that, but I think forever is a problematic concept. And I think that at minimum, two things. One is taking care of your collections is a bedrock of a museum. It doesn't matter what museum you are. And so whether you call it forever or not, it's a bedrock. And the second thing is, I think that it's really important to make those decisions about how you define forever intentionally and consciously, and not just fall into them, and not just let them be the easy way to sort of proceed. Because like, there's no forever, so let's just not worry about it. And I know that's not what you're saying, but also I think that's the easy trap to fall into. And so put it out as a policy and stand behind it.
Yeah. Well, I think the time is run out. So, like, forever is a very complex notion. We will put it in. Thank you so much to the audience, and thank you to Steve and Emmett.